Paul Robeson was an American icon and a towering figure who became one of the most celebrated and controversial personalities of the 20th century. Paul Leroy Robeson, athlete, actor, singer, and activist, was born in Princeton, New Jersey on April 9, 1898. He came from a family marked by the legacy of slavery and resistance. He had a distinctive personality characterized by immense talent, intellectual brilliance, and an unwavering commitment to justice. Robeson's early years were shaped by both achievement and loss. His father, William Drew Robeson, was a former slave who had escaped to freedom and later became a Presbyterian minister. His mother, Maria Louisa Bustill, came from a prominent African-American family with roots in the abolitionist movement. The family valued education and dignity above all else. Young Paul, as he was called, learned early that excellence was not just expected but required for a black person to succeed in America. When Paul was 6 years old, tragedy struck the Robeson family. His mother died in a house fire, leaving his father to raise 5 children alone. The loss devastated young Paul, though he rarely spoke of it in later years. His father became the dominant influence in his life, instilling in him a sense of pride, discipline, and moral purpose. Reverend Robeson moved the family to Somerville, New Jersey, where he continued his ministry despite facing racism and economic hardship. He taught his children that they must be twice as good as white people to receive half the recognition. This lesson would shape Paul's entire life. Paul excelled in school from an early age. He was naturally gifted intellectually and showed talent in music, athletics, and academics. He attended Somerville High School, where he was often the only black student in his classes. Despite facing discrimination and isolation, he distinguished himself in every field he attempted. He played multiple sports, sang in the Glee Club, debated, and maintained the highest grades. His achievements were so remarkable that he won a statewide academic scholarship to Rutgers College, becoming only the 3rd African-American student ever admitted to the institution. At Rutgers, Robeson faced intense racism. He was excluded from social activities, threatened by fellow students, and subjected to brutal treatment on the football field. During his first football practice, white teammates deliberately targeted him, breaking his nose and dislocating his shoulder. They wanted to drive him off the team, but Robeson refused to quit. He recovered from his injuries and returned to practice with a determination that could not be broken. He eventually earned the respect of his teammates through his athletic ability and his refusal to be intimidated. Robeson became one of the greatest college athletes in American history. He was a 2-time All-American football player, playing end with a combination of size, speed, and intelligence that made him dominant. He also excelled in basketball, baseball, and track, but athletics were only part of his achievements at Rutgers. He maintained exceptional grades, won prizes for oratory and debate, and was elected to Phi Beta Kappa, the nation's most prestigious academic honor society. He sang in the Glee Club and performed in campus theatrical productions. By the time he graduated in 1919, he had been named class valedictorian. His commencement speech addressed the contributions of African Americans and called for racial understanding. He stood before the audience as living proof that black people could achieve anything if given the opportunity. After graduating from Rutgers, Robeson enrolled at Columbia Law School in New York City. He needed to support himself while studying, so he played professional football on weekends for the Akron Pros and the Milwaukee Badgers. Professional football in the 1920s was a rough, poorly paid sport, nothing like the organized enterprise it would later become. Robeson was one of the few black players in the early professional leagues. He endured constant racism on the field, but his size and skill made him formidable. He stood 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighed over 200 pounds, enormous for that era. While at Columbia, Robeson met Islanda Cardozo Good, a chemistry student and one of the first African-American women to work as an analytical chemist. She was intelligent, ambitious, and from a well-educated family. They married in 1921. Islanda, who went by Essie, recognized Paul's extraordinary talents and became his manager, promoter, and driving force. She pushed him toward a career in performance rather than law, believing his talents were wasted in a profession that would likely deny him opportunities because of his race. Robeson graduated from Columbia Law School in 1923 and took a position with a New York law firm. His time as a lawyer was brief and disillusioning. White secretary refused to take dictation from him because of his race, and the firm's partners made it clear that he would never be allowed to appear in court or interact with clients. He realized that no matter how qualified he was, the legal profession would not accept a black man as an equal. He left the law firm after only a few months, never to practice law again. It was a painful lesson in the limits that racism placed on even the most talented and educated African Americans. Instead, Robeson turned to the stage. He had been performing in amateur theatrical productions, and his commanding presence and powerful voice had attracted attention. In 1924, he appeared in 2 plays that launched his professional acting career. He played lead roles in productions that dealt with African American life and experience. His performances were revelatory. Critics praised his natural ability, his dignity, and his emotional depth. He brought to his roles an authenticity that white actors attempting to portray black characters could never achieve, but it was Robeson's singing that would make him internationally famous. He possessed one of the most remarkable voices of the 20th century, a deep bass baritone of extraordinary range, power, and beauty. He began giving concerts of spirituals, the religious songs created by enslaved African Americans. These songs had rarely been performed in concert halls. They were considered folk music, beneath the attention of serious musicians, but Robeson transformed them into art. He sang spirituals like Deep River, Go Down Moses, and Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child with such profound emotion that audiences were moved to tears. He brought dignity and respect to music that had been dismissed or mocked. His concerts were not just performances but cultural events that celebrated African American heritage. In 1925, Robeson appeared in a revival of The Emperor Jones, a play by Eugene O'Neill about a Pullman porter who becomes ruler of a Caribbean island. The role was demanding, requiring the actor to be on stage almost continuously for the entire performance. Robeson's portrayal was powerful and nuanced. He made the character complex and human rather than a stereotype. The production was a success, and Robeson's reputation as a serious actor was established. He followed this with a role in O'Neill's All God's Chillun Got Wings, a play about an interracial marriage. The production caused controversy before it even opened, with racist groups threatening violence over the depiction of a black man married to a white woman. Robeson received death threats, but he refused to be intimidated. The play opened as scheduled and his performance was acclaimed. Robeson's career took him to London in 1928. He appeared in Show Boat, the groundbreaking musical by Jerome Kern and Oscar Hammerstein. He played Joe, a dockworker, and sang All Man River, a song that would become forever associated with him. His rendition of the song was so powerful that it stopped the show nightly. Audiences demanded encores. The song's lyrics spoke of the burden and endurance of African American laborers, and Robeson sang it with a depth of feeling that made it an anthem. He would sing All Man River thousands of times throughout his career, though he later changed some of the lyrics to make them less submissive and more defiant. London in the late 1920s and 1930s offered Robeson something he could never find in America, a degree of acceptance and freedom from the constant humiliation of racial segregation. In England, he could stay in fine hotels, eat in restaurants, and move through society without the restrictions imposed by American racism. He and Essie settled in London, and Paul became a celebrated figure in British cultural life. He performed in concerts and plays, made films, and was welcomed into intellectual and artistic circles. For the first time in his life, he experienced what it was like to be judged primarily on his talents rather than his race. During his years in London, Robeson appeared in numerous films and stage productions. He played Othello in a 1930 production that was highly praised. He made films including Sanders of the River, Show Boat, and The Proud Valley. Some of these films were problematic, presenting stereotyped or colonial views of African people. Robeson later regretted appearing in some of them, feeling that he had been used to promote racist narratives, but he was learning, developing a political consciousness that would come to define his later life. Robeson's political awakening came gradually through his experiences and his studies. He was an intellectual who read voraciously in multiple languages. He learned Russian, Chinese, and several African languages because he believed that understanding a people's language was essential to understanding their culture. He studied African history and culture at a time when these subjects were dismissed or distorted by Western scholars. He came to understand that the oppression of African Americans was connected to the oppression of colonized peoples around the world. He saw that racism was not just individual prejudice, but a system that served economic and political interests. In the 1930s, Robeson became increasingly involved in leftist political causes. He supported the Republican side in the Spanish Civil War, seeing it as a fight against fascism. He visited the Soviet Union and was impressed by what he saw as a society without racial discrimination. In the Soviet Union, he was treated as an honored guest and saw black people from Africa and America living and working without the restrictions they faced in the West. He became convinced that socialism offered the best hope for racial equality and economic justice. This conviction would have profound consequences for his career and his life. When World War II began, Robeson was vocal in his support for the Allied cause. He saw the war as a fight against fascism and racism. He performed countless concerts for troops and war workers. He spoke at rallies and raised money for war bonds. He used his fame to advocate for African American soldiers who were fighting for freedom abroad while being denied it at home. He called for the integration of the armed forces and for equal treatment of black workers in defense industries. His activism made him increasingly controversial among conservative Americans, but he was undeterred. In 1943, Robeson achieved one of the greatest triumphs of his career when he played Othello on Broadway. It was the first time a black actor had played the role in a major American production with a white supporting cast. The production was directed by Margaret Webster and co-starred Jose Ferrer and Uta Hagen. Robeson's performance was magnificent, combining power, intelligence, and tragic depth. The production ran for 296 performances, a record for a Shakespeare play on Broadway that stood for decades. Critics hailed it as one of the great theatrical events of the era. For Robeson, playing Othello was deeply meaningful. He brought to the role his own experiences of racism and his understanding of what it meant to be an outsider in a hostile society. But even as Robeson reached the peak of his artistic success, his political activities were making him enemies. After World War II ended, the United States entered the Cold War with the Soviet Union. Anti-communist hysteria swept the country. Anyone with leftist sympathies became suspect. Robeson's admiration for the Soviet Union and his criticism of American racism made him a target. He refused to denounce the Soviet Union or to moderate his criticisms of American society. He spoke out against lynching, segregation, and economic exploitation. He connected the struggles of African Americans with the struggles of colonized peoples in Africa and Asia. He argued that the same forces that oppressed Black Americans were oppressing people of color around the world. In 1949, Robeson attended the Paris Peace Conference and made remarks that were reported, possibly inaccurately, as saying that African Americans would not fight against the Soviet Union in a war. The statement caused an uproar in the United States. He was denounced as a traitor by politicians, newspapers, and even by some African American leaders who feared that his radicalism would harm the civil rights movement. The backlash was swift and severe. Concert venues cancelled his performances. His records were removed from stores. He was blacklisted in the entertainment industry. His income, which had been substantial, virtually disappeared. In 1950, the State Department revoked Robeson's passport, preventing him from traveling abroad. The government claimed he was a security risk, though no charges were ever filed against him. The loss of his passport was devastating. It cut him off from his international audience and from the income he earned performing in Europe. It confined him to a country where he was increasingly isolated and persecuted. Robeson fought the passport revocation in court for 8 years, arguing that the government had no right to restrict his travel because of his political views. He refused to sign an affidavit declaring he was not a communist, insisting that his political beliefs were his own business. During the 1950s, Robeson was subjected to constant surveillance and harassment by the FBI and other government agencies. His phones were tapped, his mail was opened, and agents followed him. He was called before the House Un-American Activities Committee, where hostile congressmen interrogated him about his political beliefs and his associations. Robeson refused to cooperate. He invoked the Fifth Amendment and denounced the committee as the true un-Americans for violating constitutional rights. His testimony was defiant and eloquent. He would not be bullied into renouncing his beliefs or betraying his friends. The persecution took a terrible toll on Robeson. He was cut off from his profession and his audience. Former friends and colleagues abandoned him out of fear or disagreement. He was vilified in the press and threatened with violence. Concerts he attempted to give were picketed or attacked. In 1949, a concert in Peekskill, New York erupted into a riot when anti-communist groups attacked concert-goers. People were beaten and cars were overturned. Robeson sang anyway, surrounded by union members who formed a protective cordon. The violence at Peekskill showed how deeply the hatred against him ran. Despite the persecution, Robeson refused to leave the United States or to moderate his views. He continued to speak out, to perform when he could, and to fight for the causes he believed in. He gave concerts in churches and union halls for audiences of working people. He recorded albums and wrote articles. He remained connected to the African American community and to progressive movements. He saw himself as part of a long tradition of resistance, following in the footsteps of Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and his own father who had escaped from slavery. In 1958, the Supreme Court ruled that the State Department could not deny passports based on political beliefs. Robeson's passport was restored. He immediately traveled to London, where he was welcomed as a returning hero. He performed concerts throughout Europe and received standing ovations. He visited the Soviet Union and other socialist countries where he was honored and celebrated. For a brief time, it seemed that he might rebuild his international career. But the years of stress and persecution had damaged his health. He was 60 years old and exhausted. Robeson's later years were marked by declining health and increasing isolation. He suffered from depression and physical ailments. In 1961, he attempted suicide while in Moscow, though the incident was kept secret for years. He underwent treatment for depression and spent time in hospitals. He returned to the United States in 1963 and lived quietly in New York and later in Philadelphia with his sister. He made few public appearances and gave no performances. The great voice was silent. The civil rights movement of the 1960s brought new attention to racial injustice, and some younger activists rediscovered Robeson and recognized his pioneering role. But he remained a controversial figure. The mainstream civil rights organizations had distanced themselves from him during the McCarthy era, and that distance was never fully bridged. Robeson had sacrificed his career for his principles at a time when others chose accommodation. Some saw him as a prophet who had been ahead of his time. Others saw him as a man whose political choices had been misguided. Robeson's wife Essie died in 1965, ending a complicated marriage that had lasted more than 40 years. They had one son, Paul Jr., who became his father's protector and advocate. The younger Paul worked to preserve his father's legacy and to tell the true story of his life and achievements. Robeson spent his final years living with his sister Marian in Philadelphia. He was a recluse, rarely leaving the house. His health continued to deteriorate. He suffered a stroke in 1976. On January 23, 1976, Paul Robeson died in Philadelphia at the age of 77. The cause of death was stroke. His funeral was attended by thousands who came to pay respects to a man who had been one of the greatest performers and one of the most courageous activists of his era. He was buried in Ferncliff Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York. The tributes that poured in recognized both his artistic genius and his moral courage. Robeson's legacy is that of an authentic American hero who paid an enormous price for his principles. He was one of the greatest singers and actors of the 20th century, an athlete of extraordinary ability and a scholar of impressive range. He used his talents and his fame to fight against racism and injustice. He refused to be silent or compliant when silence and compliance might have preserved his career. He understood that his individual success meant nothing if his people remained oppressed. Modern historians recognize Robeson as one of the most remarkable Americans of the 20th century. His artistic achievements alone would have made him significant. His bass voice has never been surpassed for its combination of power and beauty. His performances in Othello and The Emperor Jones set standards that later actors have struggled to match, but his importance goes beyond his art. He was a pioneer in connecting the African-American freedom struggle with anti-colonial movements around the world. He understood that racism was a global system, not just an American problem. Robeson's political views remain controversial. His support for the Soviet Union and his refusal to criticize its repression of dissent troubled even some of his admirers. He was wrong about many things regarding the Soviet system. But his core beliefs about racial equality, economic justice, and human dignity were right. He saw clearly that American democracy was incomplete as long as millions of its citizens were denied basic rights because of their race. He refused to be grateful for small concessions when full equality was the only acceptable goal. Perhaps the most fitting assessment of Paul Robeson comes from his own words. He once said that the artist must elect to fight for freedom or slavery. He made his choice and never wavered from it. He could have been merely an entertainer, wealthy and celebrated, if he had stayed silent about injustice. Instead, he chose to use his voice for more than singing. He spoke truth to power and accepted the consequences. Robeson represents a particular type of American hero, the person of immense talent who refuses to separate art from conscience. His story inspired generations of activists and artists who saw in him proof that success meant nothing without integrity. He showed that being the best in your field was not enough if you did not also fight for justice. His life demonstrated that there are things more important than career, comfort, or safety. In the end, Paul Robeson was neither a perfect man nor a saint, but rather an extraordinary individual who lived an extraordinary life. His legacy includes his artistic achievements, his athletic accomplishments, and his unwavering fight for human rights. He is remembered today as one of the greatest performers America has produced and as a symbol of courage and principle. His life spanned an era of incredible struggle and change. From the aftermath of slavery to the civil rights movement, from Jim Crow to Black Power, he participated in that transformation and helped shape it. Robeson was in death as in life a man of talent and conviction, remembered for his artistry, his courage, and his unwavering commitment to justice and human dignity.